Samantha was elated. A new town, a fresh start, and her very first babysitting gig in the sprawling mansion at the edge of the woods. The house belonged to the Reeds, a couple with an enviable reputation in the community. They had 2 children, Emma and Lucas. Upon arrival, Mr. Reed briefed her about the children's bedtime routine, their dinner, and some house rules. "Oh, and there's one more thing," he hesitated. "Please don't answer any landline calls. We're getting it disconnected soon. It sometimes gets these odd pranks." Samantha nodded, slightly amused. Once the parents were gone, the evening went smoothly. The kids were playful and warm, and she felt at ease. However, as night crept in, the massive house began to echo its age, every creak and whistle magnified in the silence. At around 10 p.m., the landline rang, its shrill tone cutting through the house's stillness. Remembering Mr. Reed's words, she ignored it. But it rang again and again until curiosity got the better of her. Hesitantly, she picked it up. "Hello?" A girl's voice, eerily calm and familiar, whispered, "Keep an eye on Lucas. Don't let him near the fireplace." Confused, Samantha responded, "Who is this?" The line went dead. She checked on the children. Emma was sound asleep, and Lucas sat by the fireplace, playing with some old toys. It seemed harmless, but she couldn't shake off the unease the call had sparked. She moved Lucas away and made a makeshift bed for him in the living room. The phone rang again. This time the voice said, "Emma sleepwalks. Lock her room." It was the same mysterious girl, her voice filled with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. Samantha did as instructed, locking Emma's door from outside, ensuring she wouldn't wander around the big house. Throughout the night, the calls continued, each with specific instructions. Check the back door. Turn off the kitchen lights. Don't respond to any knocks after midnight. Though terrified, Samantha followed every directive. There was an uncanny accuracy to the warnings. Lucas did try to go to the fireplace multiple times. There was an unlocked back door, and around 1 a.m., there were persistent knocks that grew louder and more desperate, but eventually faded. Morning light brought relief. The Reed parents returned and noticed the changes Samantha had made around the house, particularly the locked door to Emma's room. As Samantha narrated the night's events, Mrs. Reed's face turned ashen. She took Samantha aside. "About a year ago, we had a babysitter, Lydia. She was perfect, attentive, and loved the kids. But one evening, we returned to find her gone. No trace. Lucas had burns, and Emma was found in the woods. We never figured out what happened." Samantha's heart raced as she realized the calls were from Lydia, guiding her, ensuring she didn't meet the same fate. The eeriest part, the landline had been disconnected months ago. Weeks later, while visiting the town's library, Samantha came across old newspaper clippings. She learned about the mansion's dark history. Previous owners, sinister events, children lured into the woods, mysterious fires, and a series of unexplained disappearances, including a young girl resembling Lydia. The realization hit Samantha hard. Lydia, even in her absence, had protected her, guiding her through the mansion's malevolent challenges. However, the lingering question remained. Where was Lydia? And what force still lingered in the Reed mansion? Samantha left the town soon after, but often found herself jolted awake by phantom phone rings in the dead of night. The whispering echoes of the past, a constant reminder of the mysterious mansion and the girl who vanished into its shadows. Sarah's first impression of the Mason house was that it was breathtaking. An old Victorian manor, it stood tall amidst overgrown gardens, its exterior walls lined with ivy. However, the striking feature was its windows and mirrors, which covered almost every conceivable space inside. The mirrors were of various sizes and shapes, with intricate designs etching their frames. Hired to babysit for the weekend, Sarah was introduced to the twins, Ellie and Evan, who were about 6. Their parents warned Sarah about the usual bedtime, allergies, favorite toys, but also added an odd request. Avoid playing too much near the mirrors. The kids get distracted. The first evening was pleasant. The twins were affable and playful. But, as night began to spread its shadowy fingers, the atmosphere in the house took a subtle shift. Ellie and Evan became more withdrawn, especially around the mirrors. Curiosity piqued. Sarah observed the twins as they silently stood in front of a large, ornate mirror in the hallway. It was then that she noticed it. Ellie's reflection slowly reached out to touch the real Ellie's hand, even though Ellie remained motionless. Panicking, Sarah pulled the twins away. They both stared at her with an eerie calmness. "They just want to play," Evan whispered. "What do you mean?" Sarah stammered. Ellie looked back at her reflection, which was now waving slowly. "The other us. They're lonely." Throughout the night, wherever there was a mirror, the twins were drawn to it. Sarah watched in horror as their reflections acted out of sync, showing a dark and distorted version of the world. In one reflection, the beautiful mansion was dilapidated and ruined. In another, it was ablaze. In an attempt to stop the madness, Sarah decided to cover the mirrors with sheets. The twins protested at first, but soon fell into a restless sleep. In the quiet of the night, a soft whisper echoed through the house. Following the sound, Sarah approached a small mirror she had missed. The whisper became a voice, pleading, "Let us out. Swap places. It's your turn." Suddenly, the sheet-covered mirrors began to bulge and pulse, as if something was trying to push its way out. The whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony of voices, each begging for freedom, for a chance to exist in the real world. Terrified, Sarah raced to the twins' room to find both standing upright, their eyes solid black, staring into a hand mirror. Their reflections were laughing, their voices clear now, "Join us. Play forever." Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the mirror and smashed it on the ground. The world spun, and a chilling wind swept through the room. When everything settled, the twins lay on the ground, unconscious but breathing. The reflections were gone. The next morning, with the early light rendering the previous night's events surreal, the Mason parents returned. Sarah hastily explained the events, expecting disbelief. Instead, they looked at each other, their faces pale. Mrs. Mason sighed. "This house, it was built on a fractured realm. The mirrors serve as gateways. We thought the twins would be safe, being born here." Sarah left the Masons, never to return. The mansion was soon abandoned, standing as a silent testament to the mysteries within. But the townsfolk speak of seeing two young children, on moonlit nights, playing near the house, their laughter echoing eerily. Whether they're the twins or their reflections, no one dares to find out. From the moment Amelia stepped into the Williamsons' old farmhouse to babysit their 3 kids, she could feel the weight of its history. The house, with its creaky stairs and musty scent, was an archive of antiques. The children Jamie, Lily, and little Timmy were as charming and boisterous as any their age. The evening began well. Amelia cooked, played with the children, and finally, it was time for the most cherished routine, the bedtime story. In Jamie's room, Amelia noticed an old book she hadn't seen before. It was a beautifully crafted storybook, its cover a vibrant display of whimsical creatures and fairy tale castles. Curious, Amelia decided to read from this book. The title read, "The Tale of the Brave Sitter." As Amelia began to read aloud, the kids nestled into their beds, lulled by the rhythm of the story. It began as a charming tale about a kind and clever babysitter named Amelia, who was tasked to care for 3 wonderful children in a grand old house. Initially, Amelia was amused by the uncanny coincidence. As she continued reading, however, the story became too familiar. It started narrating the events of her evening, the games they played, the dinner they had, even the details of their conversations. An uneasiness began to settle within her. Feigning cheerfulness, Amelia continued reading, though her voice had started to tremble. The story became darker as it progressed. As the clock chimed 10, Amelia read aloud, a chill running down her spine as the old grandfather clock in the hallway indeed chimed 10. The story then described a spectral figure looming behind Amelia. She swiftly turned, heart pounding, but found nothing. Dismissing it as a product of her fear, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Then came the most terrifying passage, and as Amelia read the ancient book, the spirit of the old nanny, consumed by jealousy and rage at being replaced, crept closer and closer. Amelia felt a cold wind blow through the room, the candles flickered, casting an eerie shadow. She could hear soft whispers, growing louder, echoing the same threats written in the book. The children, who had been listening with wide-eyed fear, began to whimper. As Amelia reached the final chapter, it ominously foretold her fate at the hands of the spectral nanny. Panic surged within her, but then she had an idea. Relying on her instinct, Amelia began to deviate from the written tale. She told a tale of her own, the brave babysitter who befriended the spirit, acknowledging her pain and offering her solace. She narrated about how the spirit, seeing the kindness of the sitter, found peace and chose to leave the world of the living, finding her way to the other side. As she spun this tale, the room grew warmer. The spectral whispers, once filled with anger, now seemed calmer, sadder. By the time she ended her story, the whispers had stopped, the air was warm again, and the children, though scared, had a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Exhausted, Amelia closed the book, tucking the children in bed. The rest of the night was quiet and uneventful. When the Williamsons returned, she explained everything. They listened, their faces growing paler by the minute. "We never mentioned her," Mrs. Williamson started, her voice shaky. "The old nanny. She passed away in this very house. We didn't want to scare you." In the following days, the house felt lighter, as though a heavy veil had been lifted. Amelia's brave act had not just saved her, but also freed a trapped spirit. She had faced the terror of the storybook and rewritten its ending, proving that she was indeed the brave sitter the book had claimed her to be. But she made a solemn promise to herself: never again would she judge a book merely by its cover. As the clock ticks towards dawn, this is Midnight Callers signing off, reminding you, when darkness falls, the stories rise. Sleep tight, if you dare.